Today we're going to step back about 30 years ago with Rockford Fosgate in their DSM series, specifically the Punch 60 DSM. Let's take a look at the February 1993 Car Audio and Electronics magazine, where these amps were introduced as new models, replacing the Punch 45, 75, and 150s. DSM stood for Discrete Surface Mount Technology, which was a vast change from the previous HD models that were available in the early 1990s. If you're an old school Rockford Fosgate fan, welcome to the club. I've tested a lot of these amplifiers in previous videos and shown them off. Check links in the video description. I'll have a link to a playlist of all the Rockford Fosgate old school amps I've tested, including the HD series, DSM, Power, a whole lot more. These DSM series amplifiers were heavily marketed back in 1993, talking about these new Punch amplifiers, better sound, more outrageous power, all in-channel VFETs, new reference. That's right, made in the USA still back then. Let's take a look at the 1993 Car Audio and Electronics from April 1993 and look for the Punch DSM amps. And we can see the Punch 60 DSM right in the middle, $369 back then, is equivalent to $785 in 2023. These new DSM amplifiers definitely had a new look to them. They had the same hammered finish as previous amplifiers, but these actually had end caps that removed. Why'd you want to do that? Well, you could hide your connections to make for a really clean install. However, it did add almost 3 inches to the length of the amplifier, so in some cases people just didn't use these. And some people just threw them away, unfortunately, because these things are worth their weight in gold today. Another huge change for Rockford Fosgate was these have the terminal blocks built in. No more Molex plugs and dangling wires. Thank you so much. Here on one end of the amp, you can see the speaker outputs. Left speaker output here, positive, negative. Treble control for up to 12 dB at 20 kilohertz. Gain control or individual for left and right, as well as the RCAs. Also, we have a bass control, the typical 45 hertz up to plus 18 dB, and the right speaker output there is on the right. These accept up to 8 gauge wire. On the opposite side, we have a spade style connector for remote turn on, power LED, and on the far right side, we have the power and ground via terminal block. These are the same as the speaker outputs, which accept up to 8 gauge for your power and your ground. Now, as far as dimensions go, amplifier measures 10.6 inches by 9.6 by 2.6. Of course, that's with the end caps on. If we remove the end caps, we're going to take about 2.6 inches off the length, and we'll get about 8 inches total from the terminal block on one end to the terminal block on the other. As far as ratings, Rockford rated these at 11.6 volts DC, 4 ohms 30 by 2, 2 ohms 60 by 2, or 4 ohms 120 watts bridged. The original Punch 60 DSM did not have any built-in crossovers. Later models, including the Punch 60 IX and Punch 60 X2, did have crossovers built in. The amp dyno test here will show the power output in watts on the left, the ohm load in the middle, the voltage dyno on the right. We'll also have the remote clamp so we can calculate amplifier's efficiency.
So let's do this thing!
We turn on the amp here, you'll see the power LED come on right beside the remote terminal. These are the stereo tests first. We're going to have all channels hooked up left and right, hooked up to the dyno. So let's try 8 ohms first at 2 channels. These amps aren't rated at 8 ohms, but we figured we'd show the test anyway. 1 kilohertz track, certified up to 1% distortion. We get 41 watts per channel, 13.56. Now let's try 4 ohms. Amplifier is rated 30 watts by 2 at 11.8 volts. Certified test first to 1% distortion. We're around 13.5 volts. We get 78 watts per channel. Quite a bit more than that 30. Well, let's turn it down to around 12 volts and see what we get. Certified 1 kilohertz. And you can see we still get double the rated power, 63 watts at 12.16. What about dynamically? Let's try that using the 1 kilohertz track. Around 75 watts, 76 watts per channel at 13.5 volts. Now what about if we crank that voltage up? That's right, turn it up and let's see what we get around 14.4. Let's try that dynamic test at 14.4. And not a huge difference here. Right around 80 watts per channel, 79 watts times 2. 2 ohms, 2 channel. It's rated 60 watts by 2 at 11.6 volts. Certified test first takes up to 1% distortion, 1 kilohertz track. And yes, once again, we double the power, 121 watts per channel. Now, Rockford actually lists a different spec for the dynamic power. They say 130 watts by 2, and you can see we get right at it at 13.5 volts, but they actually rate the dynamic power at 14.4. So let's turn up that voltage to get us closer to 14.4. Try that 1 kilohertz dynamic track again. And yeah, we still meet that rated power easily. 130 by 2 it's rated. We get 137 by 2 at 14.3. Next up, we'll bridge the amp for the mono test, which is the left positive and right negative channel. And that way we can get more power, get double the power out of a 2-channel amp into 1. Let's try 8 ohms mono, rated 60 watts at 11.6 volts. Certified test takes us up to 1% distortion and more than double. Once again, even at 13.5 volts, 145. Let's try uncertified to clipping. We are using the 40 hertz track here because we figured if you bridge the amp, you're most likely using it on a subwoofer. 157, 13.53. Then let's send the dynamic pulse track into the amp. Again, 40 hertz. Here we go, 152, 154. Is it counting up anymore? Nope, that's it, 154 at 13.52. Now let's go to the 4 ohm mono, where it's rated 120 watts at 11.6 volts. Certified test first to 1% distortion. Using the 40 hertz track, we get 224, 13.44, so 100 watts over the rated power. Now let's turn it back down to 12 volts and see what we get. Certified on the sub channel 171, so we're still 50 watts over the rated power, even at 12 volts. Back up around mid-13s, let's try uncertified up to the clipping point. And there you go, we're busting close to 250, 244, 13.38. Dynamically, let's try this at 40 hertz. Again, we're close to 250. It's actually rated 260. And there we go. There's 251 at 13.56. Now let's crank that voltage up closer to 14.4 and see what we get here dynamically. And there you go. Looks like they're pretty much right on with the dynamic ratings. We get 274 at 14.28. Now these amps are not rated for 2 ohms mono or 1 ohm stereo, but we're going to try it because we got amazing power with the Punch 200 in an earlier test. However, with this one, it did not even run the certified test. It just kind of went into protection and came back out, but did not even run. What about uncertified up to clipping? Again, it got up to about 77 watts, and it was like, nope, don't think so. So, all right, so let's try it one last test here. Dynamic burst. Let's see if it'll do that, and it does do the dynamic burst at 40 hertz. We're getting 300 plus, us closing in on 400, 378 at 13.4. Now here are the results of pretty much all the tests I just showed, including the efficiency numbers, which I did not show before. Notice the 2-channel tests were done at 1 kilohertz. The mono test or bridge tests were done at 40 hertz. In addition, there were 12 volt and 14.4 volt tests I did not add to this list, just so you know. Now let's try some sound demos with the ELAC bookshelf speakers as well as a subwoofer. Here we go.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight.
I know I tell you guys I don't talk sound quality because it is subjective, but the amp sounded fine to me. Didn't notice any issues. Sounded great with the ELAC bookshelf speakers. Next up, we wired the Savard 6.5-inch high Q sub to 4 ohms so we could try this amplifier out with a small sub to see how it sounds as a subwoofer amp. Get ready for the boom and flex. The amp did well with the subwoofer, proving that you don't have to have a ton of power to get some bass with your subs. Now let's take the bottom panel off. We have to take 6 screws off the bottom as well as one on the side, and we kind of slide the panel off. You can see the guts of the amplifier here. See some of these riser driver cards. Also, you see the transformer there at the back. And we can see here on the board 2293. This is Rev B. We can see the 25 volt 330 microfarad caps here. Also 2200 microfarad 35 volts as well. Well, there you have the Punch 60 DSM, underrated Rockford Fosgate power as always. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back with more. Till next time, Big D, I'm out of here.